make a start now. So welcome to this Fringe meeting. My name is Vicky Blake. I am the president of UCU, University and College Union, and I'm really pleased to be here tonight with some excellent speakers. And as I mentioned, just as some of you were coming into the meeting, we will be recording for only the period of time that the panelists are speaking. Then when we go into the discussion, just to make sure everyone feels free and able to contribute as they would like, we will switch the recording off. But the recordings of the speakers will be put up onto YouTube after the meeting. So you'll be able to share the speakers with anyone who was unable to make this meeting. So we have a really incredible lineup tonight. I'm really chuffed to be asked to chair this meeting. The order in which we're going to take the speakers is we've got Dr. Marianne Stephenson, who is the Director of Women's Budget Group UK. Then we'll be hearing from Bella Fashiola, who is an RMT Churchill's cleaner and striker. And following Bella, we'll hear from Sarah Woolley, who is the General Secretary of, I always get the name in a muddle, the BFAWU, the Bakers Union. And following Sarah, we'll go to Fran Heathcote, who is the current president of PCS Union, and then we'll be having a discussion. So each speaker will have up to 10 minutes each. I've warned them that if they get to 9 minutes, I will switch my camera off and then I will reappear. And if they have asked me for one, I'll be giving them a 1 minute warning. So we'll be trying very hard to keep to time and to make sure that the meeting is finished at the latest by 7. And so hopefully make lots of time and space for good conversation. So the cost of living crisis is here, is with us. It's punishing women, it's punishing low paid workers. We know that our household bills are set to increase by £1,000 a year or worse. And in April, we also have the Tory National Insurance tax hike kicking in. So we're here to discuss the cost of living crisis. And I'm really delighted to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Marianne Stephenson. So when you're ready, please take it away, Mary.
Thanks very much, Vicky, and thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really pleased to be here. It's quite depressing when I was looking at data this morning, preparing for this talk, and realised that actually, even since I was first invited to speak, the data on the cost of living crisis has got worse. You know, the Resolution Foundation warned yesterday that monthly inflation peak this spring could be as high as 8.4%, and that inflation overall next financial year is looking like it's going to be over 7%, much higher than the already high over 6% forecast in February. And although some of that forecast increase, particularly the most recent increase, is the result of the war in Ukraine, it's really important not to let the government frame this as being about the crisis in Ukraine or about COVID. This is also a crisis in incomes. You know, this crisis has been a long time brewing. We've seen over a decade of austerity policies, low wages, suppressed wages, and cuts to social security have left many people in poverty. Most recent ONS data showed that the average income of the poorest fifth of people fell by 3.8% per year on average between 2017 and 2020. So you can see that fall in incomes. This is not just a problem of prices, this is a problem of incomes. And obviously COVID has made that worse. While the richest households saved money during COVID, the poorest fell further into debt, which means that large numbers of people have absolutely no cushion to cope with rising prices now. And it's particularly working class women, Black and minority ethnic women, and disabled women who are going to bear the brunt of this crisis. You know, we know that these are the groups that bore the brunt of austerity, particularly cuts to social security. We did research with the Runnymede Trust a few years ago, which showed that. And we also know from more recent research that COVID has hit women harder in terms of incomes. So what we're looking at, first of all, energy bills are due to go up. A typical energy bill is due to increase by 54% this April. That follows a previous increase in October and a further increase likely next October. And these increases are particularly hard for poorer families because they spend a higher proportion of their income on fuel, but also because Poorer customers are more likely to be on prepayment meters, and standing charges for prepayment meters, which have also gone up, are higher than those for customers paying by direct debit. And those problems, again, come on top of pre-existing problems of fuel poverty. So in 2019, that's the most recent year for which we've got figures, over 13% of households were in fuel poverty, and single parents were particularly likely to be in fuel poverty. In fact, in the year between 2018 and 2019, the number of single parents in fuel poverty increased from 18.9% to 28%, 28% of single parent households in fuel poverty. And single parents are particularly vulnerable to a whole range of the issues that I'm going to talk about. We think about the increase in food prices that's already started and being forecast to get worse. Pre-COVID, nearly 20% of households with incomes of under £200 a week reported food insecurity. A staggering 41% of lone parents with 3 or more children were food insecure. That's pre-COVID and pre the increase in the cost of living. So you're already seeing people pushed to the brink. And there are particular gendered issues here because women are more likely to be poor. Women do 60% more unpaid work than men, most of which is care work, which means we have less time for paid work, which means we earn less, own less, and are more likely to be living in poverty. And you can see even with wages over the last year, average weekly earnings increased by 4.7% between December last year and December this year, but there were significant gender differences. Men working full-time saw their weekly wages increase by over 5%, while the wages of women working full-time increased by only 2.5%. So you can see there that as we go into this crisis, women are in a worse position than men, women working full-time in particular, a worse position than men. Overall, income poverty is a real issue here. We're seeing people on social security benefits facing an increase of only 3.1% planned for April. That's less than half of what's needed to keep line with inflation. And that will hit women harder because they're more likely to rely on social security for a larger part of their incomes. And the increase in food and fuel costs has a disproportionate impact on the poorest households, not only because money's tighter, but because they spend a higher proportion of their income on food and fuel. Poorer households spend more on essentials than richer households. So in the last year, the poorest 10% of households spent 54% of their total expenditure on housing, food and transport, compared to 42% of the richest, of spending for the richest 10%. And the richest households have considerably more potential to cut back on spending. The richest 10% of households spend nearly 5 times as much on discretionary spending, things like recreation, restaurants, hotels, meaning it's much easier for them to tighten their belt. So what do we need? First of all, we need to talk about this as a crisis of incomes as well as a crisis of costs, which means action on low pay, but also on low earnings. And those two are different. A large number of women in in-work poverty actually experience low earnings. So it's not necessarily that their hourly pay is low, it's that their weekly earnings are low because they're working fewer hours. So there's issues there around investing in childcare in particular to allow women to enter the labour market and increase their earnings. And we also need to keep benefits in line with inflation. And that includes housing benefit, local housing allowance, which again has been refrozen, and action to tackle housing costs. I think that's me in for under 10 minutes. Thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Mary Ann. And you were definitely under 10 minutes, so house points to you. Thank you. I'm next really delighted to introduce Bella Fashiola, who is an RMT Churchill's cleaner. It's the outsourced cleaning dispute and RMT striker. And you'll have up to 10 minutes as well, Bella. And as I said to you, I'll pop in and say 1 minute to go if you get to 9 minutes, just so that you know. So over to you.
Hello, everyone. I work as a train cleaner, and we've currently been doing strike action as we're on £8.91 an hour, half an hour unpaid break, no sick pay. So the cost of living crisis for us is very bleak. As it is right now, we can't afford to even live on the earnings that we're making. When I started with Churchill's back in 2017, I could save about £1,000 in 6 months. Now we're all lucky to have any money left come 2 weeks before payday. Due to us being low paid workers, it means that we're forced into work when we're ill, especially in the pandemic. I know that there must have been a few people who went into work with COVID because they just can't afford to be off. Some people are using their annual leave to go into work when sick, because if they don't use their annual leave, they can't afford a £12 a day SSP that they would receive. Also, something I found out recently with my company is that we've had to ask them for a premature baby policy due to the fact that if a mother gives a maternity leave date and she has that baby early, my company will not pay for the time that she's off in hospital looking after her newborn child until it reaches the date. They simply say that you can request it in writing, but it will take 6 weeks for us to confirm that. Being a low paid worker means you're treated with complete disregard of being a human being, you're not respected. And for someone my age, I'm 25 years old, the way that this country is going, people my age, low paid workers, we won't be able to buy our own house. We won't even afford to buy or have a 1-bedroom place. So it's really, really dire. We need to get a grip on the situation. Churchill workers have taken strike action since February the 23rd last month. We're doing a great job. We're standing together because we have to fight for this now, because we're not going to get another opportunity like this again. Some of our workers are homeless due to being on such low wages, and some of our workers are coming into work when they're really not fit to do so. If anyone can support us, we will be doing strike action this weekend, and we will be setting up a hardship fund due to workers being too scared to come out, thinking that they're going to get sacked or they cannot afford to do it. Also, I want to talk about the understaffing. Being low paid workers means that the disrespect that comes into it, we can be doing the work of 5 people for 1 person on £8.91 an hour. I don't even think the real living wage would be enough for us now to survive. People are going out getting payday loans and then struggling the next month, and then it just gets worse and worse and worse. It's a downward spiral to being completely bankrupt, no money, you can't live. It affects mental health for all of us as well. We have no social lives if we're working 6 days a week and still can't even survive on that. So if anyone wants to show support and solidarity, there'll be picket lines all around London and the South East this weekend, the 12th and the 13th, to support low paid workers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bella. That was fantastic. And the conditions that you described, the opposite of fantastic. And I hope that people will, if they're around London, will make the trip to visit some of your picket lines. Okay, thank you very much. And our next speaker is Sarah Woolley from the Bakers Union. Sarah, are you ready? We'll have 10 minutes. Excellent. Okay. Whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Vicky. And just right on cue, next door dog started barking. And just before I start my contribution, you know, I always think nothing can surprise me any more about the way that employers are, but you know what Bella's just said about the premature baby policy, I was sat there gobsmacked. You know, I mean, wow, that's just disgusting on so many levels, that you had to get a policy in place because they've decided that they're not going to pay people if their baby decides to come early, because who can plan on when they're going to have a baby. But I'll not rant any further about that. I just wanted to make the comment that employers are just getting worse and worse and worse, aren't they? And I know that's not news to anybody on the call. Thanks to TUCG for putting the meeting on tonight and for the invitation to join you. It's been a fantastic conference today. We've passed so many motions around ending gender-based abuse, bargaining for women's rights and representation, and it's a fitting time to have a fringe meeting on the cost of living crisis, and some clear examples already about how tough it is for women in our movement. The Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union represents people throughout the food industry, predominantly low paid, many on precarious contracts and working unsociable hours. Many women, and it seems to be generally women who are on part-time contracts, especially in the manufacturing side. There are some men, but they tend to be older men phasing out into retirement. Retail slightly different, as generally contracts are part-time, though we typically see, as you can imagine, more women working in those roles overall than men. We've got members working in places like Greggs, Warburton's, Mr. Kipling's, Fox's Biscuits, and so many more places and products are made by BFAWU members. And the one thing that they all have in common, and quite probably with yourselves too, is that they've worked throughout the pandemic, keeping the nation fed in our case. Yet many, when we ran our Right to Food survey last year, have struggled to keep themselves and their families fed through the pandemic. Many can't afford to purchase the very products they produce, and that's before the impact of the removal of universal credit uplift Vicky mentioned, the impending rise of national insurance contributions, and of course the energy price hike. Then we've got petrol rises and further costs of living that are far exceeding the wages that our members are paid. And the rising cost of living is quite frankly killing people, and disproportionately more women, as they are more likely to be on lower pay or part-time contracts. More and more of our work colleagues and community friends are being driven into absolute poverty, struggling to make ends meet, feed themselves and their families, keep themselves warm, or even get to work or school. And it's only going to get worse as the cost of living continues to rise. Because let's face it, businesses, certainly in our sector, will increase the price of food and drink, as well as turn the screws on employee pay, terms and conditions to protect their own profits, meaning many will be hit twice through this. And sisters, we've got a choice to make right now, because we can't rely on the government to do the right thing. They've shown time and time again they are more interested in parties and giving their rich friends more money on the back of our struggle. And the Labour Party, our supposed opposition, have shown us repeatedly that we can't rely on them either. So it's us collectively as a union movement, BFAWU members, UCU and RMT members, that have got our absolute solidarity in the action that they're taking. PCS members, Equity, CWU and every other trade unions members that have to make a decision, because it isn't people like me that can do that. As a general secretary, I'm just a person with a title who can speak on platforms like this about our members' issues and elevate your voice and your decisions, but it's your voice as members that is important and leads the work that we do. And as members, as I touched on, you have a decision to make. You have a choice. Do we continue to let the rich get richer whilst we're forced into paying back rebates on energy bills that we've not asked for, see our friends and our colleagues rely more and more on food banks and struggle to survive? Or do we say no more? Do we remember that collectively we are powerful, and that it doesn't matter whether you're a food operative, a teacher or a public sector worker, that we as a class really are all in this together? And only by standing shoulder to shoulder in solidarity collectively can we drive the change we need in order for our members and our sisters to thrive. Because as I said, we can't rely on the politicians to make the changes we need. And I know it's scary. We're tired after the last couple of years and everything COVID and the fallout has thrown at us, on top of over a decade of austerity and the ever rising cost of living. But we've got to dig deep. We've got to make a stand. Take inspiration from members in the likes of UCU and RMT who are taking industrial action. Follow the lead of PCS consulting on their members on what action they're willing to take. Because it wasn't the millionaires, the bankers or the elite that have got us through this pandemic. It was teachers, public sector workers, food manufacturers, rail staff, NHS and retail staff, and the many other key workers that were celebrated, but that are now struggling to make ends meet. And we shouldn't be left footing the bill for the government's mistakes and mishandlings. So sisters, we need to stand strong. Remember that we are powerful and stand in absolute solidarity with each other when we're taking action. Thanks, Vicky.
Thanks very much, Sarah. And Just really important messages there that I'm sure we'll come back to in the discussion as well, but thank you so much. I'm going to move on to our fourth speaker. I'm pleased to introduce Fran Heathcote, who is the PCS president. So over to you when you're ready, Fran.
Thanks very much, Vicky, and thanks everyone for having me along tonight. And I just really want to start by saying so much of what the other speakers have said have hit home with me, because I think at the core of an awful lot of what we're facing are the same key issues, and that is this rotten government and the way that they are treating workers in this country. PCS, or the Public and Commercial Services Union, is predominantly civil servants and predominantly people employed by government, but a growing part of PCS is the CS of PCS, the commercial sector. Those are people that would have been civil servants had their work not been sold off to private contractors who bid for government contracts on minimum pay, minimum terms and conditions. And when I was listening to Bella, so many of our members in dispute at the moment within PCS work not for the government, but for some of these companies where we're just fighting to get them the living wage, to get them the entitlements to sick pay, to put in place proper maternity and paternity policies, and all of the things that sometimes as civil servants we have taken for granted. We're seeing us having to campaign and fight for those members. So it's a really brave step, I think, to take industrial action and to have the confidence and build the confidence in the membership to be able to do that. So I applaud you, Bella, and I applaud all groups of workers that are currently taking industrial action. And just really to pick up where Sarah left off, PCS is 2/3 female, so we're a predominantly female trade union, and there's no doubt that the cost of living crisis is hitting our female members disproportionately. And I mean, I work for the department. I'm employed by the Department for Work and Pensions, and we are responsible for delivering government policy on social security. And if you see some of the not just the attacks that are currently in place, but some of the things this government are planning around the future of social security, it's absolutely frightening. So that message about us all standing together in solidarity becomes really, really important, because it should be seen as a failure of government and a sign of a broken society that Boris Johnson is praising the fact that Britain has so many food banks. But of course, instead, that's something that he feels quite proud to talk about. And at the heart of all these attacks on workers are cuts in privatisation policies that go back over 40 years, not only stealing wages and pensions and benefits in the way that people have outlined, but chipping away at valuable public services that working class people need to get by. So we need to obviously demand more wages, but we have to, in public service, have that mantra of no cuts, no privatisation, defend public services and defend the National Health Service, because those are attacks that are facing all of us. As Sarah said, our union is currently balloting all civil service members for what we call a consultative ballot as opposed to a statutory one around those key issues of pay, pensions and the cost of living crisis. Because there's a really disgraceful attempt at the moment by this government to try and shift the blame for some of what's going on onto public sector workers, but more specifically onto civil servants. Not that long ago that our members were being praised and clapped on a Thursday night and thanked for the fantastic job that they were doing keeping the country running throughout the pandemic, many of them putting themselves at risk. So how dare the government now seek to blame our members and public sector workers more generally? On pay, there really is a crisis where our members can't wait, which is why we've taken the step that we've taken. We've obviously got about another 10 days, I think it is, to run in our consultative ballot, and clearly the big test now is whether we'll be able to beat the threshold, whether we'll be able to get more than 50% of the civil service to turn out in this ballot in order to have a mandate for pursuing a statutory ballot. But it's really clear that there are some absolutely hard-hitting issues that are affecting all members, obviously, but particularly our women members. We did Mark Swatk and myself did a Facebook Live event last week, sort of midway through the ballot, to make sure that people were on board. And we invited people to talk to us about how low pay was affecting them. And the stories are heartbreaking. Bear in mind, these are civil servants. So if you listen to the press and the media, these are people that are well paid, wear bowler hats and drink a lot of tea, when the reality is very, very different for an awful lot of our members. There were women on the call there was a woman who could only afford to heat one room in her house. She shared a house with her adult son. So she was working from home in the one room that they could afford to heat, while he sat wrapped in a duvet all day because they couldn't heat that room. There was another woman who couldn't make her wages last. You know, as Bella was talking about, you get to a couple of weeks in and you've run out of money, and was chipping into her adult son's ESA to get by. And these are sort of real life, real members' stories, as I say, in areas that are sort of presumed, I think, to be comfortable or well paid and to have good terms and conditions. But over a period of time, obviously what we've seen are real attacks. I mean, I got our fuel bill through at home last week, and it had gone up by about 50%, and by over £1,000. Next month, national insurance contributions increased by 10% for everybody. Council tax bills are going up everywhere to pay for social care. The average member of PCS, I mean, bear in mind that a lot of our members are fairly junior grades, so a PCS member earning £20,000 a year will see a hike in the national insurance contributions, and is now worse off by £2,300 a year since 2011. So I think the clear message from our members is that they can't wait and stand by whilst the government is doing what they're doing on all of these issues. But Sarah's absolutely right. What's key to everything we're doing, you know, whether you're in UCU, whether you're in the RMT, Unite, Bakers Union, you name it, we need that solidarity, don't we? We need to be standing together as sisters, as trade unionists, as activists, and making it clear that we won't stand by and see our jobs and our pay and our terms and conditions attacked. And for a long time, as a strategy, PCS has been calling to sort of coordinate action wherever possible. So in other words, we're always stronger, we stand together. And I know that there are an awful lot of the issues that members in a lot of unions are facing right now that link us up, that we you know, unite us in terms of some of our struggles. And I think our job as activists is to seek to build the biggest, most coordinated movement possible against everything that this government is doing. So we need to be agents for change. We need to give our members a little bit of confidence that there is something you can do, and that being in a trade union, being a member of a union that will support you, will stand by you, will campaign for better policies in the workplace, will defend your rights at work, but will also campaign to seek to get you the money that you need to survive and live on, is clearly really, really important. So obviously, whilst a lot of trade unions have quite rightly been focused on safety and on these on the big campaigns around the pandemic to keep everybody safe, whether they're in the workplace or working from home, as life moves on, I think the world of work has changed, and quite clearly people will be working differently in future. But nevertheless, those core principles around solidarity, around sticking together, remain vitally important. So Vicky, I'm going to leave it there for now. As always, happy to take any questions or comments, but I just think it's really important that it's great that we've got so many sisters from so many different trade unions here tonight, but I think we really have to be talking about how we can build a movement going forward capable of pushing this government back on some of the worst attacks that we're facing. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening.
Thank you so much, Fran. And if you'll indulge me, I've just been asked if I would say a few words as well about the UCU disputes. To do this, I have to wear my hat. So you hopefully are aware that the University College Union is, we have major disputes on the go across higher education. We're also, we've just launched a consultative ballot in our further education sector as well. And again, that is on pay and conditions, and echoing every single contribution here, the impact that is being felt by ordinary workers under this government, under the way things are going, is so extreme. And it's already so awful. I don't think that people are fully prepared for how bad it's going to get yet. So I want to try and pick up some themes that have kind of come through in the speakers that have.
Vicky, you're on mute.
Oh, I think I was maybe forcibly muted. Sorry, I don't know how long I was speaking while I was muted, but what I was saying was I think that there are themes that have come out of the discussion that we've had so far tonight. Every speaker has talked about the abdication of any sense of moral or actual responsibility from this absolute shower of a government that we have, but also the way that that kind of behaviour is actually mapping out into how many employers are treating workers on the ground. And something that is coming through in our 2 disputes in HE, higher education at the moment, that we have 2 disputes running over theft of our pensions, and I'm using that word deliberately, and over what we're calling forfights, which is pay and pay related conditions. So those are precarious work, inequality in pay. So we're talking about a 17% race pay gap, a 9% disability pay gap, and a 15.5% gender pay gap. And then also recognizing the intersectional way that those pay gaps actually operate. So people can be really on the sharp end of those issues coming together, including coming together with being on precarious contracts. A workload crisis. I'm no longer calling it anything else. We had a really huge problem with workload in our sector before the pandemic. It intensified dramatically through the pandemic, and that continues now. We're seeing threats to jobs as well in some institutions where we've had local disputes as well to fend those off. But fewer people being expected to do more work for less pay seems to be a theme also on the insecure contracts. So we're really fighting on every front. But what I find really astonishing about it is that it's about really basic decency. It's about decency in our working lives now and about decency in our retirement. And we have made our arguments repeatedly and clearly to our employers that we're not asking for the moon on a stick. We're asking for very reasonable demands that actually fall short probably of what we deserve. But we've been trying to be practical. We've been trying to forge a way forward. We've been asking them to work with us. And currently they are not negotiating with us properly at all on the forfights, which is pay and pay related dispute. And they are not really engaging with us properly in the pensions dispute either. And we're now seeking to reverse the cuts that they have tried to put through to our pension. The theme that I wanted to pick up through all of this is that of the bullying and gaslighting behaviour of our employers. We're in a cost of living crisis. We have a government that is absolutely horrific. But many of us are in situations where we're working for employers who can afford to raise our pay, who can and must be made to address the gender pay gap that affects us not only now while we're working, but also in retirement. They have to address every inequality pay gap. They must be made to address the issues of workload crisis that are making so many of us sick. They have to be made to address working conditions and contracts that mean that people don't have access to proper sick pay. And it was just devastating to hear Bella speaking just now about people going to work when they are sick and not being able to afford to be sick. The policy that you described around people who've given birth to premature babies, I think it shocked all of us. And these conditions, I think, are in every sector. There are precariously employed people across every sector, and it's increasingly become the case that we're asked to accept that that's normal. And the disputes that we are in, and we have strike action again in 2 waves. So some branches are going to be out from the 21st of March for a week, and others are going to be out from the 28th of March for a week. Some of us, if we've been in both disputes, have already taken 13 days of action. We took action in 2018, 2019, 2020. We took a back step to deal with the pandemic, and we were rewarded for that with a 0% pay offer. And we took strike action in December of 2021, and here we are again in 2022. And if you look at the press, we're being accused of all sorts of things, being unrealistic, being, you know, off the wall, like asking for things that just aren't possible. And our management teams are being presented and are trying to present themselves as sensible. And I think that any manager or any management that presides over strikes that many years in a row over such basic things is failing, and we're not failing. And I think that is the message that we need to take forward. So Fran, you ended on a note of we have to build a movement and we have to support each other. That is absolutely the case. Doing it in the face of anti-union laws makes it harder, but it's not impossible. And I think if we rewound to when we were getting ready to ballot in 2018 in UCU, we were all, to be completely honest with you, scared about whether or not we would get over that threshold, and we smashed it in most of the branches that we balloted. And each time we've all had our hearts in our mouths about whether we're going to make it over the line, and there have been some disappointments, and we have reballoted in those situations as well, and we've built that back and we keep building. We're going to be reballoting soon because our mandate expires after 6 months, and in 6 months what the employers have tried to do is time it out and wait on us and hope that they will break us, and that will be the tactic that they take everywhere. And the only way that we're going to be able to push back on that and to oppose it is to draw on each other's strengths and to recognize that collectively we become so much stronger. And we have had visits on our picket lines in UCU from loads of other unions, and it's really moving whenever people come, and we're trying to make sure that we're getting to meetings. And it was great to be invited to PCS meeting recently. I've also been to an RMT branch meeting recently. Like, we're doing as much talking as you would like about our dispute. We're in this together in a way that when the government says it, they don't mean it, but we really do. So I think there is something very powerful in us recognizing what we can do when we threaten to and actually do withdraw our labour. And if there are ways that we can share between unions how to get the vote out, what tactics of work, what conversations we need to have, if there are ways that we can support each other, I think we have to explore that. And to really make it happen, because it's not impossible. They just want us to believe that it is, and it isn't. So solidarity to every single person who's here tonight. I will now shut myself up and we'll return to chairing and say what we're going to do is take the recording off now. So